Welcome to another edition of the Effective Living series. This is your springboard for the year 2022. It's 4 weeks of learning to set you up for the year. This week we're focusing on rebuilding professionally, and I have a man who is really strategic when it comes to learning and knowledge, Robert M. Bennin. He's a strategy consultant and he's the chief learning strategist at Temple Advisory. He's also a leadership subject matter expert on an MBA program. That's a lot of things. We'll talk about all of that. Today, his topic is continuous learning for the knowledge worker. Continuous learning for the knowledge worker. And that's happening for the next half hour. Robert, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Bernard. Happy New Year to you and your listeners.
Same to you. You are the chief learning strategist for Temple Advisory. Spend a minute talking to me about that. I've never heard of that position. Chief learning strategist.
Yeah, I mean, Bernard, now we're all learning. Every organization is a learning organization.
Okay.
And strategy is always learning and defining new realities. So as a chief learning strategist at Temple Advisory, what I do every day is to learn and facilitate learning for leaders and organizations.
Amazing.
Last year, for example, we designed over 80 learning events, most of them virtually, and in the areas of strategy, leadership development, team development. We also organize coaching for organizations, and we coach leaders individually. So that's what we do.
So you are a Marshall Goldsmith certified executive coach.
Yes.
And you are also at Temple. And so Temple, what kind of advisory do you do?
So it's strategy consulting and leadership development.
Fantastic.
That's what we focus on.
Amazing. Yeah. So let's break this down into continuous learning. I have about 9 questions for you. Yeah. Why must we continue to learn? That's my first question.
Bernard, I mean, you've chosen such an important topic. Let me just put this in context. I was just listening to Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning author, just a couple of weeks ago. He wrote a book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah.
And he was interviewed recently, and he says he's changed his thoughts on a chapter he wrote in the book.
Oh, already?
Already. And so...
And I haven't even finished reading that book.
Yes.
I have to throw that chapter
so you have to continuously learn. That's the only currency for the knowledge worker in the 21st century. And as soon as you stop learning, you run out of capital. For the knowledge worker, your capital is the knowledge that you possess.
Who is a knowledge worker?
A knowledge worker is you and I and anybody, and it's actually been defined, who goes to work and spend most of his time sitting behind a PC, processing information, using information to make decisions. And so compared to a couple of years back, and if you go way back, we'll spend our time on the farm and then maybe in the factory. But now we're all going to the offices and we're using information to serve customers, to organize teams, to develop new products, to innovate, to make change happen. We're knowledge workers, and there are about 1 billion of us globally. And all of us are expected to reskill, given the changes that we're witnessing today in business.
So it's an imperative.
It's an economic imperative. For
what are some of the benefits of continuous learning?
Bernard, you have to learn. I mean, you have been learning.
Yeah.
Your listenership is changing.
Yeah.
The console that you use probably might have changed
a few times.
and so you have the only way you can keep your seat is to continue learning. That gives us the opportunity to continue to do the work that we do and to grow in our professions and have a fulfilling, meaningful careers. Without that, you lose your relevance, you lose your currency, and you may find yourself not having anything meaningful to do. So learning improves our self-esteem, it nurtures our curious mind. As a matter of fact, it has health benefits. I mean, it keeps the mind active and engaged. I know a leader who says that every day he solves the New York Times puzzle. That's a form of learning.
Every day?
Every day he's engaging the brain. And that's important for us today.
I see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are said about learning. And I guess some may be true, some may not be true. So if you can just delve deeper into the subject of learning, share truths about possibly some of the misconceptions.
Yeah, a couple of them. And let me get straight into the truth. And that's foundational. It's the basis for our conversation. Learning is not the product of teaching.
Hey.
Learning is the product of the activity of the learner.
Hey.
Yes.
Teachers will not be happy with you. Learning is not the product of teaching.
It's not the product of teaching. I am also a teacher. I'm a facilitator. What I do is to design the learning process.
Okay.
And then my learners come to the table to kind of have dinner. So it's not what I do per se, but what the learner does when he is learning. And so let me use this African proverb to explain my view. And I love African proverbs. I have a friend, and we always joke with some of these African proverbs. You learn to cut down trees by cutting them down.
Not by reading about them in a book.
Exactly. So you cannot separate
learning by
from,
doing.
Yes, you cannot separate learning from performance.
You learn to cut down trees by cutting them down.
Yes, so you cannot separate learning from performance.
That's so true.
Which means that we always need to put ourselves in positions where we practice, we reflect on what we're doing every day.
Which means that mastery is a product of not just understanding.
That's just the first step. It's the practice that helps you build the mastery. It's the learning and translating that learning into performance. Your ability to learn rapidly and translate that learning into performance is your ultimate advantage. And so you need to learn how to learn, and then you need to learn how to translate that learning into performance. So the real amplifier is learning, and really it's the product of the activity of the learner, what the learner does, how he or she engages him or herself. That's what learning is.
So those are two basic truths. Learning is not a product of teaching, but it's a product or activity of the learner.
Yes.
And learning is by doing.
It's by doing.
Not just understanding.
No.
So those are two key truths.
That's foundational.
Any myths or misconceptions about learning?
Well, a very popular one. Because we believe that we learn from experience, you know, but that's a delusion. We don't learn from experience. We do not. We do, particularly when our learning horizons are much longer. So let me give this basic example. When you touch a hot stove and immediately you feel the burning sensation in your hand, you experience the result of your actions, and you learn immediately not to touch a hot burning stove. You may be a 2-year-old, you may be a 20-year-old, you've learned that. But when, as knowledge workers, the actions that we take today, the results, the consequences are coming down the line, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, we're not able to link the two, and we think we're learning from experience. That's not true. We do not learn from experience.
Wow.
Yes, we only learn from experience when we reflect on that experience. Wow. And so we're actively engaged in monitoring our own activities and the results thereof. Then we're learning. But just going through a process doesn't mean you've learned through the process. And that's how come we see, I mean, most of us, we keep repeating the mistakes that we make because we haven't taken time to reflect, to harvest the lessons from our experience. So we don't learn from experience.
So
it's
you call it the delusion of learning from experience.
It's a delusion. It's the delusion of learning from experience.
Wow. So we learn from the experience that we reflect on.
Exactly. When we have reflected on our experiences, then we're learning, but not because we've just gone through the experience.
This is the Effective Living series, and we're talking about learning. My guest is Robert Bennin. Robert is a strategist, a learner, and he teaches as well. I'll tell you a few things about Robert before we continue with the program. He's done quite a number of things. So he's a founder and chief learning strategist for Temple Advisory. And he's made over a decade of impact, raised over 10,800 learners or leaders. They've done almost 600 learning programs, over 130 clients in many, many countries. Okay, let's talk about the barriers. Economists talk about barriers to entry. I'm sure if learning were that easy, everybody would have done it. So what are some of the barriers to learning?
You put it well. Learning is not easy. it's not a pleasant experience in most cases. I mean, you remember when you were learning how to ride your bike. I'm sure you had a couple of bruises. So the learning process is messy. And that's how come sometimes, I mean, yeah, we're rational human beings, so we find it convenient to stay away from learning. We do not want to be challenged. One of the key barriers to learning that we must break is we should learn to say, I don't know. Because you can never know everything. But we find it very difficult to say, I don't know. When you say, I don't know, that's demonstrating your curiosity and willingness to allow your perspective to be broadened by other people's perspective. I ran the CEO Accelerator program. And this is for business leaders, leaders who are running their own organizations. And one of the first models is how we break barriers to our learning, because we need to continue learning. And one of the practice activities is practicing to say, I don't know. And it's a big challenge. You know, Bernard, I mean, you're a senior leader in this organization. And so team members come to you and they come with questions. How often do you say, I don't know?
I actually don't know.
You know, sometimes we want to prove that we know, we have the answers to maybe justify the seat, the position that we are in. And so we're tempted to always give answers. But rather than saying, I don't know, what are you thinking? What can we do here? You know, and that's a barrier all of us must break.
So that's a key barrier.
It's a key barrier.
Inability to say I don't know.
Inability to say I don't know.
Okay.
It's a barrier we must break.
Okay.
Well, the other barrier we must break is we must not confuse learning with acquiring information.
Hey.
And that's the point, the foundational truth we laid. Because learning is active, it's practice. And so the fact that you've read a book, the fact that you've read how to cut a tree down, doesn't mean you know how to cut it down. And finally, we're almost always, instead of jumping into learning, assessing people, assessing situations. So you get into a room and you see this guy wearing spectacles trying to make a point, and you are judging who is he, what is he trying to say. But you can just stay curious a bit and suspend all these judgments and assumptions and learn from the person. You want to know who he is, the degrees he's holding, what he's done before, then you listen to him. No, but you can learn. You can at least permit yourself to listen to what is being said, and you will evaluate, rather than constantly judging, assessing people and situations before we learn. Because there's so much to learn and there's a lot happening around us. And really, as I said in the beginning, your ability to learn rapidly and translate that learning to action is the ultimate advantage. So if you delay, then you're losing currency. And so those three barriers must be broken.
So you've dealt with the myths, you've dealt with the truths, you've dealt with the barriers. So how do you go about learning?
Well, you learn every day, you learn everywhere, you learn from everybody, you learn every time. But I want to share a framework. I mean, this is a very popular learning and development framework. It's the 70-20-10 model.
Okay.
That's used in organizations, and individuals can also use. As we start a new year and we're all seeking to rebuild professionally and improve the way we learn. 70-20-10, because from research we know that all of us, most of our learning comes from our on-the-job experience. That's where we derive 70% of our learning. And the job you're involved in, it's a challenge if you don't love your job. Because if you don't love your job, then you're not engaged. Then how do you learn? You're actually throwing away 70% of the opportunity. And so when, for example, you're asked to lead a meeting, this is on the job. It's an opportunity to learn. Somebody is on leave and you're asked to deputize, cover up for the person. You get the opportunity for an added role. Those are the opportunities for learning on the job. And so we have to expand it. Sometimes you're also involved in other what I call secondary investments. So, well, we may say our side gigs, you know, those are also opportunities to learn. You may be involved in clubs and associations. These are opportunities to learn. You may be head of marketing for the association, and so building the image and the brand of the organization. It's a brilliant opportunity. It's a low risk environment. It's an association. It's not necessarily your organization where you have a bottom line you need to protect. And these are fantastic opportunities to step up. And as we start the year, I mean, some of us can make resolutions to actively learn using these spaces. But there are three things we need to bear in mind if we want to make our learning effective on the job.
Okay.
Number one, you need to define for yourself what you seek to learn from every job engagement. So you are being proactive. You define for yourself what you're seeking to learn from the job engagement.
Okay.
And you acknowledge the critical learning moments. And so, for example, you're running a meeting and you really want to learn how to end the meeting well. So everybody leaving the meeting know exactly what they are supposed to do. That's the learning moment. And when it gets to that time, you're very observant, you're in the moment, and you're looking at how you prepare the meeting and how you set up the meeting to end well. And then we need to conduct after action reviews, those postmortems, because we don't learn from experience, we learn by reflecting on our experience.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I've had a great show today. Everybody is giving me great feedback, and I need to sit back. So what really went well? What did I do well? What can I improve? Spending time to go through that post-mortem, that is what makes the 70% effective. If you're always busy running from task to task, not even paying attention to define for yourself, do I really want to learn from this? And how well have I done this? Then you're really leaving a lot of money on the table.
So that's the 70-30.
That's the 70%.
Yes, then and the 70 is your job related.
It's job, what you're doing, what you're learning, by engaging in your primary job experience.
And the 20% is where?
The 20% is from developmental relationships.
Okay.
So you have a senior at work, you have other colleagues at work, taking feedback from them, allowing yourself to be mentored by them. Just learning from their department and what they do, you are broadening your scope.
Okay.
But I also want to mention, there is what we call reverse mentoring.
Reverse mentoring.
Reverse mentoring. Okay. Because leaders, particularly now that stuff are changing and we have some digital tools that some people who were born before the computer may not be familiar with, you also pick a mentor. You know, because normally when we talk of mentoring, we're thinking of a senior colleague at work and a junior colleague. So the senior is mentoring the junior.
Yes.
But here we think of mentoring as the skill to be learnt, the competency to be learnt. And so I can be a senior, but I don't have this competency. And I'll go to a junior who just joined the firm a year ago and has that competency.
So for example, like for most of us in management, we are not very great with some IT stuff. So you may have a technician who is coaching you every day. And you see managers preparing for some exam and they are sitting in the office of the technical guys and they are now showing you how to manipulate the system because that's,
Exactly. I mean, you may not even know how to have a virtual meeting.
Yes. Set it up for you.
Don't struggle. Don't go through the process of struggling every time. Just say that this is a learning moment and call somebody in
to help you.
Take time to learn. And then subsequently begin to engage in practice and you perfect your skill. That's reverse.
So that's the 20%.
That's 20%.
And then there's the final 10.
Then there's a final 10. That's the formal learning.
Okay.
Where you are engaged in a formal training program.
Okay.
You are engaged in a structured reading program.
Okay.
And I'm choosing my words carefully. It's a structured reading program. And the number there is 10%, and it's critical. because this is where we learn the new knowledge, new information, new insights that complement what we're learning from on the job and the developmental opportunities. So the 10% must be maximized. And so let's work through some numbers here. You know, if there are say 250 working days in a year, you know, and 10% probably 25. So it means that minimum we should be actively engaged for about 30 minutes every day, doing some reading, doing some review work, doing some journaling. That for every knowledge worker who really wants to lead in the 21st century, your target is a minimum of 30 minutes every day. Wow. Actively engage in some learning, structured learning. And don't say, wow, there's this gentleman called Michael Simmons, and you can Google that article. He boldly wrote that if you are not learning 5 hours per week, you are being irresponsible.
Hey. if you're learning 5 hours per week?
Yes, per week, you are being irresponsible.
That's serious.
Yeah, because you have no excuse. He gives
5 hours per week.
5 hours per week. You're being irresponsible, particularly for leaders, knowledge workers, because there's so much changing. There's so much that you. I mean, he gave in that write-up. There are several examples. For example, Obama, with all his busy schedule as a president, he took time off to read every night for about an hour.
Really?
Yes.
While he was president?
While he was president in the White House.
Amazing.
Yeah. But that's because you have to do it. That's the only way you keep abreast with times and be able to creatively innovate, come up with new solutions. If you're a leader of an organization and you want to understand what's changing in your industry, you already have subscribed to a couple of journals or a couple of top publications. So maybe you sign up to a Harvard Business Review or a New York Times or Economist. I mean, an economist, look at that volume. As a matter of fact, when I started, I spoke to a mentor in this country who told me that, you know, you have to read The Economist every week, you know, and read cover to cover.
Everything.
Everything in it, you know. And so you need to read that. Yeah. And I mean, but I can simplify this for our learners. You know, now we've started the year, and if you go to most of the learning portals, they would have prepared and presented maybe the top 10 articles of the year. Yes. So if you don't have time, just go for that.
The top 10.
If you go to Mackenzie, you can read the top 10.
Top 10.
If you go to FT, you can read the top 10. If you go to Forbes, you can read the top 10. Yeah. That alone will bring you up to speed with what's happening in our world. You get new insights that you can use for your work. And so that's a way to quickly bring yourself up.
And the tools are available. E-learning,
Coursera, I mean, TEDx, YouTube videos. And that's how you can really do it if you want to, just finding that 30 minutes every week in a structured manner.
What do you have to learn?
Good question. 3 things, Bernard. 3 things you have to learn. I believe that for all of us, first you need to learn how to learn.
Learn how to learn.
You need to learn how to learn. Yeah, because the real amplifier is learning. And some of us, we need to get better at that. All of us, we need to get better at that. How do you read quickly? You know, how do you observe? How do you ask the right questions? How do you stay curious? You just need to learn how to learn. And there are resources for that also. I mean, just Googling, I mean, there are so many researchers, psychologists that have done a lot of research. We know how our mind works. And so you get to learn how you can actually assimilate properly and be able to remember the things that you read. These are skills that we need to learn, you know.
So learn how to learn.
Yes, you learn how to learn. I mean, if you really have to improve your speed and be reading all the time, would you want to read with the pen, underlining, I mean, moving the pen on the page as you go from word to word? I mean, that's something maybe you learned some time back, but that's not helping. And you need to break that habit. So you need to learn how to learn. And speed read and just looking at the text.
Assimilating the numbers, the data quicker. I see.
And so that's the first thing, learning how to learn. Secondly, you need to learn about yourself. Peter Drucker said that for us as knowledge workers, success belongs to those who know their strengths, their values, and how they work.
Wow.
So you need to learn about yourself. What are the strengths you bring to the job on a daily basis? What do you find interesting? What are your own values? I mean, in last December, we ran a couple of workshops for a group of people, and one of the key issues we were discussing is helping these leaders to come to terms with their own values and leading with their values. And for most of them, that was a pleasant experience, very revealing, insightful for them, because they haven't, throughout their life as leaders, they haven't had the opportunity to confront that question. What are my values, and how do I bring these values to work? And so it's important that we learn about ourselves.
So learn how to learn about yourself. And then the final one.
Finally, you need to learn to thrive.
Learn to thrive.
Yes, in the space that you work in. In that context, you need to learn how to thrive. And so if you work in an organization, you need to know what are the priorities here.
Okay.
What is my team trying to accomplish? You have to. What are the top trends shaping my industry?
Okay.
And that's learning to understand your own context and thrive in the environment that you operate in.
So my guest has been Robert Marshall Bennin, founder and chief learning strategist at Temple Advisory.
Yeah.
He's a leadership and learning expert. And you can call or go on Facebook or social media and get more information. They're on LinkedIn. They are also at thelearningtemple.com. That's all we have time for today's edition. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll be with you next time with another edition. Bye-bye.